The starship Aurora glided silently through the void, its sleek hull reflecting faint starlight as it approached an uncharted moon orbiting a distant gas giant. Dr. Ilara Voss stood at the observation deck, her sharp green eyes scanning the barren landscape below. She had spent years studying alien ecosystems, but this mission felt different, electric with anticipation and unease. Ilara wasn't alone in her excitement. The crew of 12 was handpicked for their expertise, from astrophysicists to linguists. Captain Ryan Korvacs, a grizzled veteran with more scars than stories, gave the final briefing. "This moon has been sending out strange energy signals for weeks," he said, pointing to a holographic map floating above the table. "We're here to find out why." The landing was smooth, though the terrain outside was anything but welcoming. Jagged rocks jutted out like broken teeth, and the air shimmered with heat despite the freezing temperatures. As the team stepped onto the surface, their boots crunched against fine black sand that sparkled under the dim sunlight. "Looks like someone spilled glitter all over hell," muttered Lieutenant Dax, the ship's engineer, adjusting his scanner. His joke broke the tension, earning chuckles from the group. But the laughter faded quickly when the scanners picked up something unusual, a faint hum emanating from beneath the ground. Following the signal, they discovered a massive fissure leading into the moon's crust. Inside, the walls gleamed with veins of crystalline material that pulsed softly, casting eerie shadows on the rocky floor. It was beautiful, otherworldly, and completely unnatural. "This isn't just geology," whispered Mira, the team's geologist, running her gloved fingers along the glowing crystals. "It's alive." As they ventured deeper, the fissure opened into a cavern so vast it seemed impossible. Towering spires of crystal reached toward the ceiling, refracting light into rainbows that danced across the chamber. At the center stood ruins, ancient structures carved with intricate patterns that spiraled upward like vines. They were unmistakably alien. Before anyone could react, movement caught their attention. From the shadows emerged dozens of insectoid creatures, their armored exoskeletons shimmering with iridescent hues. Each one stood taller than a human, mandibles clicking ominously. The team froze, hands instinctively reaching for weapons. Then she appeared. Stepping forward, the largest creature radiated authority. Her elongated limbs ended in delicate claws, and her multifaceted eyes glowed with intelligence. A crown-like crest adorned her head, pulsating gently. To everyone's astonishment, she knelt before Ilara, lowering her massive frame in what could only be described as reverence. What is happening?" stammered Ilara, taking a hesitant step back. The rest of the team exchanged bewildered looks, unsure whether to defend themselves or stand down. Without warning, the Queen spoke, not aloud, but directly into Ilara's mind. Her voice was melodic yet commanding, filling every corner of Ilara's thoughts. "You have returned, Keeper of Balance." The words echoed in Ilara's skull, leaving her stunned. Before she could respond, the Queen rose gracefully, her gaze locking onto Ilara's with unwavering intensity. Whatever this moment meant, one thing was certain: it would change everything. After the trials, the Queen led Ilara deeper into the hive than ever before. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of energy became a steady vibration that resonated in her bones. They finally arrived at a colossal chamber unlike anything Ilara had seen so far. At its center stood an immense crystalline structure, towering, radiant, and pulsating with an otherworldly light. It looked alive, almost breathing, as streams of energy swirled within its translucent core. "This is the Nexus Core," the Queen explained, her voice reverberating with awe, even in Ilara's mind. "It was created by the ancients to maintain harmony across the galaxy. Its power keeps ecosystems thriving, civilizations united, and chaos at bay." Ilara approached cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder. Up close, the core seemed to shift and change, reflecting not just light but fragments of memories, her own and others. She saw glimpses of distant planets, alien species living in peace, and moments of unity between humans and extraterrestrials. But beneath the beauty lay something darker, a crack running through the heart of the core, marring its perfection. What happened to it? Ilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The core has been corrupted, the queen replied gravely. External forces sought to exploit its energy for destruction rather than creation. Human colonial forces, driven by greed, tampered with its mechanisms. Now it falters. And if it fails, the consequences will ripple across the stars. Ilara turned to face the queen, her brow furrowed. Why tell me this? What can I possibly do to fix something like this? The queen stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto Ilara's. You are tied to the core, keeper. Your ancestors helped forge it, and your bloodline carries the resonance needed to repair it. Only you can restore its balance. Ilara hesitated, her stomach twisting with doubt. But I'm just me. I'm no savior. I'm not even sure I believe all this. The queen tilted her head, considering Ilara's words. Belief is not required. Action is. Trust in what you have already proven. You are capable of bridging divides, of seeing beyond fear and anger. That is why you were chosen. Before Ilara could protest further, the queen gestured toward the core. As she did, tendrils of light extended from the structure, wrapping gently around Ilara's arms. A surge of warmth spread through her body, followed by a sharp stab of pain. Images flooded her mind again, this time of warships targeting the moon, scientists dissecting the core's energy, and entire ecosystems collapsing under the weight of exploitation. No, Ilara gasped, pulling away instinctively. How could anyone do this? How could my own people be part of such destruction? That is why you must act, the queen urged, not out of guilt or obligation, but because you understand the cost of imbalance. If the core falls, there will be no second chances. Ilara stared at the fractured core, her resolve wavering. Could she really take on such responsibility? Risk everything, even her life, for something she barely understood. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, placing her hands against the cool surface of the core. The moment her skin made contact, a flood of sensations overwhelmed her. Pain, hope, despair, joy, all swirling together in a chaotic storm. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Tell me what to do." The queen placed one clawed hand on Ilara's shoulder. "Channel your essence into the core. Let it guide you. But know this, it will demand much from you. Are you prepared to pay the price?" Ilara closed her eyes, steeling herself. Whatever the cost, she couldn't turn away now. Nodding silently, she focused on the rhythm of her heartbeat, letting it sync with the pulse of the core. As the process began, the chamber erupted in light, bathing both Ilara and the queen in its glow. The journey to heal the core had only just begun, but already the stakes felt insurmountable. The deeper they ventured into the hive, the more alien the surroundings became. The tunnels widened into sprawling chambers filled with bioluminescent flora that pulsed gently, casting an ethereal glow over everything. Strange sounds echoed around them, soft clicks, hums, and distant chittering that seemed to come from all directions. Ilara felt like she was walking through a living organism rather than a structure. Finally, they'd reached a circular arena carved directly into the rock. At its center stood 3 massive stone pedestals, each adorned with glowing runes that shifted and shimmered like liquid fire. Surrounding the arena were rows of insectoid creatures, their glowing eyes fixed on Ilara as she stepped forward. She could feel their collective attention weighing on her, heavy and unyielding. "This is the Chamber of Trials," the queen announced, her voice resonating clearly in Ilara's mind. "To prove yourself as the keeper of balance, you must face tests that measure your intellect, empathy, and courage." Ilara swallowed hard, glancing at the queen. "And if I fail?" "If you fail," the queen replied without hesitation, "the balance will remain broken, and both our peoples will suffer the consequences." Before Ilara could respond, The first trial began. A low growl echoed through the chamber as a creature emerged from the shadows, a hulking predator unlike anything Ilara had ever seen. Its body was covered in jagged spikes, and its eyes glowed red with hunger. The crowd of insectoids fell silent, watching intently. "Your task is not to fight," the queen said calmly. "You must communicate." Ilara's heart raced. Communicate? How was she supposed to talk to something so primal, so dangerous? She took a cautious step forward, raising her hand slowly to show she meant no harm. The creature snarled, baring rows of razor-sharp teeth, but it didn't attack. Closing her eyes, Ilara focused on calming her breathing. She remembered fragments of her earlier visions, the ancients standing beside predators, their movements deliberate and respectful. Drawing strength from those memories, she knelt down and placed her palm flat against the ground. The predator paused, tilting its head curiously. Slowly, it lowered itself onto its haunches, mirroring her posture. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered crowd as the creature let out a soft rumble and retreated back into the shadows. Ilara exhaled sharply, realizing she hadn't even noticed she'd been holding her breath. But there was no time to celebrate. The second trial awaited. This time, a holographic projection appeared above the pedestals, showing scenes of conflict between humans and various alien species. Wars, destruction, betrayal. It was a grim reminder of humanity's violent past. The queen spoke again. "Choose wisely. Show us how you would resolve these disputes." One by one, Ilara studied the projections, offering solutions based on diplomacy, mutual benefit, and compromise. Each choice sent waves of light rippling across the runes, signaling approval from the hive. The final trial was the hardest. This time, the arena plunged into darkness, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts. Visions of her own failures flooded her mind, moments when she had doubted herself, made mistakes, or let others down. Her greatest fears materialized before her: isolation, inadequacy, rejection. "You cannot run from who you are," the queen's voice whispered softly. "Only by accepting your flaws can you find true balance." Tears streamed down Ilara's face as she faced the visions head-on, acknowledging her imperfections instead of hiding from them. With each admission, the darkness lifted slightly, until finally, the arena returned to its glowing state. When the trials ended, the crowd erupted into cheers, or what passed for cheers among the insectoids, clicking mandibles and waving antennae in celebration. Even the queen seemed pleased, her crest glowing brighter than ever. "You have shown resilience, wisdom, and compassion," she said, "but the hardest challenges still lie ahead." Ilara nodded, exhaustion etched on her face, but determination burning in her eyes. Whatever came next, she knew she couldn't turn back now. Months passed after Ilara's return to Earth, but her journey was far from over. News of her encounter with the Exitherian hive spread like wildfire, sparking debates across every corner of human society. Some hailed her as a hero and visionary, while others dismissed her story as science fiction or propaganda. Despite the skepticism, Ilara refused to back down. She became a tireless advocate for interspecies diplomacy, traveling between nations, corporations, and scientific institutions to share her experiences and push for change. Her efforts weren't without resistance. Politicians argued that aligning with alien species could weaken humanity's autonomy. Corporate leaders feared losing access to lucrative resources in uncharted territories. Even within her own team, doubts lingered. Lieutenant Dax often muttered about how humanity might be biting off more than it could chew. But Ilara had allies too. Mira, inspired by what she'd witnessed on the moon, joined forces with xenobiologists worldwide to study the Nexus Core's energy patterns and their potential applications for sustainable development. Captain Korvax, though initially reluctant, began using his influence to rally military factions toward peaceful cooperation rather than conflict. Slowly but surely, a coalition of supporters emerged, united by Ilara's vision of harmony. The turning point came during a global summit held aboard the Aurora, now retrofitted as a floating embassy. Representatives from dozens of nations gathered alongside delegates from alien civilizations, not just the Exetherians, but other species intrigued by humanity's newfound willingness to listen. For the first time in history, humans sat at the same table as beings who once seemed incomprehensible, discussing shared challenges and solutions. Ilara stood before the assembly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We've spent centuries looking outward, searching for answers in the stars," she said, her gaze sweeping across the diverse crowd. "But the greatest discovery we can make isn't about technology or power. It's about connection, about realizing we're not alone, and that our survival depends on working together." Her words resonated deeply. By the end of the summit, an unprecedented agreement was signed, the Galactic Accord. It established guidelines for equitable resource sharing, environmental preservation, and mutual defense among participating species. Humanity committed to halting exploitative practices, while alien civilizations pledged to guide Earth through its transition into a galactic community. In the months that followed, tangible progress emerged. Joint research facilities sprang up on moons and planets once deemed hostile. Trade routes flourished, bringing prosperity to regions long plagued by poverty. And perhaps most importantly, trust began to grow where fear had once dominated. Ilara returned to the crystalline cavern one final time, this time accompanied by representatives from multiple species. Together, they stood before the Nexus core, its light brighter and steadier than ever. Scientists worked alongside insectoid engineers to monitor its stability, ensuring it remained a beacon of balance for generations to come. As she gazed at the glowing structure, Zirath approached silently, her crest shimmering softly. "You have fulfilled your role well, Keeper," the Queen said, her telepathic voice filled with quiet pride. "But remember, the balance is fragile. It will always require vigilance." Ilara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then I guess we'll just have to keep trying, no matter how hard it gets." Zirath tilted her head, mandibles clicking softly in what might have been amusement. "Indeed, together we shall endure." In that moment, surrounded by friends old and new, Ilara felt a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be disagreements, conflicts, and moments of doubt. But she knew they were moving in the right direction. Humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming guardians of the galaxy, not conquerors. And as the chamber filled with the hum of the core and the mingling voices of countless species, Ilara realized something else. Hope wasn't just a feeling. It was a choice. One they all had made, together. The cavern fell silent, save for the faint hum of the glowing crystals around them. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the towering queen who had just knelt before her. Her mind raced with questions. Why was this alien showing such reverence? What did she mean by keeper of balance? And most importantly, why her? "Ilara," Captain Korvax whispered sharply, snapping her out of her daze. His hand hovered near his weapon, ready to act if things turned hostile. "Do something. Say something." But Ilara couldn't move. She felt rooted to the spot, her body frozen by the weight of the Queen's gaze. The alien's multifaceted eyes seemed to pierce through her, reading every thought, every fear, every doubt. It was unsettling, and yet strangely comforting. Finally, the Queen rose slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful. She tilted her head slightly, studying Ilara like a scientist examining a rare specimen. Then, without warning, her voice filled Ilara's mind again. "You are the one foretold," the Queen said, her tone calm but firm. "The one who will restore what has been lost." Ilara blinked, struggling to process the words. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Who am I supposed to be? Why are you calling me that?" The Queen extended one clawed hand toward Ilara, palm facing upward. For a moment, it looked like she might touch her, but instead, the Queen paused, retracting her arm. You carry the bloodline of the ancients, she explained, a lineage long forgotten by your kind. My people have waited centuries for your return. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Mira, the geologist, took a cautious step forward. Wait a minute, she said, addressing no one in particular. Are we saying humans and these aliens share some kind of connection? That doesn't make sense. It does not need to make sense, the Queen replied, her telepathic voice now directed at all of them. It simply is. Your arrival here is proof enough. Captain Korvax crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. Proof of what? That our xenobiologist happens to look good in front of bug royalty. We're scientists, not believers in fairy tales. The Queen's mandibles clicked softly, a sound that might have been amusement or irritation. Belief is irrelevant, she said. Facts remain. This human, she gestured toward Ilara, bears markers within her genetic code, tied to those who once walked among us. They brought peace where there was chaos, harmony where there was discord. Ilara frowned, trying to piece together the fragments of information. Genetic markers, ancient connections. None of it made sense. But deep down, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in the Queen's words. Memories began surfacing, fleeting images of golden skies, strange beings standing side by side, and a warmth she couldn't quite place. Why me? Ilara asked finally, her voice steadier now. If I'm so important, why didn't anyone tell me sooner? The knowledge was hidden, the Queen replied, varied by time and fear. But the signs were always there, for those willing to see. Before Ilara could respond, the Queen turned and motioned for her to follow. The insectoid guards parted to create a path, their glowing eyes watching silently. Ilara hesitated, glancing back at her team. Captain Korvax gave her a curt nod, signaling that they'd stay put while she figured things out. Taking a deep breath, Ilara stepped forward, her boots crunching against the crystalline floor. Whatever awaited her deeper in the hive, she knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. As Ilara followed the Queen deeper into the hive, the air grew cooler, and the light from the glowing crystals dimmed. The towering spires of the cavern narrowed into winding tunnels, their walls lined with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. Each step echoed softly, blending with the faint hum of energy pulsing through the alien structure. The Queen moved gracefully ahead, her elongated limbs gliding effortlessly over the uneven terrain. She didn't speak again, but her presence was enough to keep Ilara walking forward despite the growing unease in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, but curiosity pulled her onward like an invisible thread. After what felt like hours, they emerged into another vast chamber. This one was different from the first. It was filled with floating orbs of light that hovered silently above pools of shimmering liquid. The liquid rippled as though alive, reflecting fragmented images on the ceiling, stars, planets, and strange creatures moving in harmony. It was mesmerizing yet disorienting, as if the room itself was trying to communicate something. This is the Hall of Echoes, the Queen said finally, her telepathic voice resonating clearly in Ilara's mind. Here, memories are preserved, not just ours, but those of all who came before. Ilara frowned, stepping closer to one of the pools. As she peered into its surface, the ripples shifted, forming a vivid image. A group of humans standing alongside insectoid beings under a golden sky. They weren't fighting. They were working together, building structures, planting crops, sharing laughter. For a moment, Ilara felt warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging she couldn't explain. These are the ancients, the Queen continued, your ancestors. Long ago, they walked among us, bringing balance to our worlds. But their legacy faded when fear and greed took root in your kind. Ilara shook her head, struggling to process what she was seeing. That can't be real, she murmured. Humans have only recently begun exploring space. How could we have interacted with aliens thousands of years ago? The truth lies buried within you. the Queen replied cryptically. With a wave of her clawed hand, one of the orbs descended toward Ilara, hovering inches from her face. Its light intensified, casting soft beams across her features. Suddenly, flashes of memory flooded her mind. Images she hadn't seen before. She saw herself, or someone who looked like her, standing beside the insectoids, speaking words she couldn't understand. She saw hands reaching out, touching crystalline artifacts, much like the ones surrounding her now. And then, darkness, war, destruction, betrayal. Pain seared through her skull, forcing her to stagger backward. What is this? Ilara gasped, clutching her temples. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the ground, overwhelmed by the torrent of emotions surging through her. You carry fragments of their past, the Queen explained gently. Pieces of a forgotten history meant to guide you. You must embrace them if you wish to fulfill your destiny. Ilara stared up at the Queen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why me? Why now? Because the galaxy teeters on the brink of collapse, the Queen said solemnly, and only the keeper of balance can restore what has been lost. For a moment, Ilara sat there, torn between disbelief and acceptance. Could she really be part of some ancient prophecy? Was she destined to bridge the gap between species and heal centuries of conflict? Or was this all some elaborate illusion designed to manipulate her? Taking a shaky breath, she stood up, wiping her eyes. Whatever the truth was, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not until she understood why these visions felt so achingly familiar. I'll listen, she said quietly, meeting the Queen's gaze. But I need answers first. The Queen nodded, her crest glowing faintly. Then come. There is much more to show you. With that, she turned and led Ilara further into the depths of the hive, leaving behind a hall of echoes and the haunting whispers of a legacy long forgotten. When Ilara awoke, she found herself lying on a soft bioluminescent bed within the hive. The chamber was dimly lit, but the walls shimmered faintly, casting soothing patterns across the ceiling. Her body felt heavy, drained of energy, yet alive with a strange warmth, a lingering connection to the Nexus core. The Queen stood nearby, her towering form silhouetted against the glowing walls. Seeing that Ilara was conscious, she approached slowly, her movements deliberate and gentle. You have done what many believed impossible, Xyrath said, her telepathic voice carrying both pride and concern. But your journey is far from over. Ilara sat up gingerly, wincing as her muscles protested. What happens now? She asked, her voice hoarse. Now, the Queen replied, you must decide how to use this victory. The core has been healed, but its power cannot protect us forever. Humanity must learn to coexist, not just with my people, but with all species across the stars. Ilara nodded thoughtfully, though doubt lingered in her mind. She knew all too well how stubborn and divided humanity could be. Convincing them to embrace peace would be no easy feat. Still, she couldn't ignore the visions she had seen. The devastating consequences of failure weighed heavily on her shoulders. Xyrath extended a clawed hand toward her. Come. Your crew waits above, eager for news. It is time we spoke openly about our shared future. Back aboard the Aurora, tensions were high. Captain Korvax paced the command deck while the rest of the team huddled around monitors displaying data collected during their exploration. When Ilara stepped onto the ship flanked by insectoid guards, including the Queen herself, the room fell silent. Captain, Ilara began, stepping forward. We've discovered something extraordinary down there, something that changes everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. Korvax raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Start talking, Doctor, and make it quick. Ilara explained everything. The trials, the Nexus core, the corruption caused by human greed, and the role she played in restoring balance. As she spoke, some members of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lieutenant Dax leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So let me get this straight, he said skeptically. You're telling us humans screwed up centuries ago. And now these bugs want us to hold hands and sing songs together. It's not that simple, Ilara countered sharply. This isn't just about guilt or blame. It's about survival. If we don't work together, none of us will survive. Mira, the geologist, chimed in cautiously. She's right. Look at the evidence. These creatures aren't our enemies. They're victims of the same mistakes we keep making. Maybe it's time we tried something different. After much debate, the crew reluctantly agreed to support Ilara's proposal, a formal alliance between humanity and the Exetherian hive. In exchange for access to advanced alien technology, Earth would commit to halting exploitative practices and fostering peaceful cooperation among neighboring civilizations. As the Aurora prepared to leave the moon, Zerath addressed the crew one final time. "Balance is fragile," she said, her voice resonating in everyone's minds. "But so is hope. Together, we can ensure neither fades." With those words, the starship lifted off, leaving behind a newfound partnership and the promise of a brighter future. For Ilara, however, the real challenge lay ahead. Returning to Earth meant facing governments, corporations, and skeptics who might resist change. Yet as she gazed out the observation window at the glowing moon shrinking in the distance, she felt a flicker of optimism. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity was ready to take its first step toward true unity. The moment Ilara connected with the Nexus core, her world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of sensations. The crystalline structure pulsed with an intensity that matched her heartbeat, each throb sending waves of energy coursing through her veins. It wasn't just physical. It was as if the core was reaching into her very soul, prodding memories, fears, and desires she had long buried. At first, the process felt exhilarating. Visions flooded her mind. Golden fields stretching endlessly under twin suns, alien creatures living in harmony, humans standing shoulder to shoulder with beings who once seemed impossible to comprehend. These were glimpses of what could be, fragments of a future where peace reigned supreme. But then came the pain. It started as a dull ache, radiating from her chest outward, but quickly escalated into searing agony. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the cold floor, clutching at her sides. The queen remained silent, watching with unwavering focus as Ilara writhed in anguish. "Why does it hurt?" Ilara gasped, tears streaming down her face. Her voice echoed faintly in the chamber, barely audible over the core's hum. "The core reflects your essence," the queen replied gently. "To heal it, you must confront not only its wounds but also your own." Ilara gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay conscious despite the overwhelming torment. She saw flashes of alternate realities, worlds ravaged by war, planets reduced to barren wastelands, civilizations crumbling under greed and hatred. In one vision, humanity stood victorious but alone, having wiped out every other intelligent species in their quest for dominance. In another, Earth itself lay lifeless, its oceans dried up and skies choked with ash. "No," Ilara whispered, shaking her head violently. This can't happen." "It already has," the queen said, her telepathic voice tinged with sorrow. "These are echoes of paths taken or yet to come. The core shows you the stakes. Will you allow history to repeat itself, or will you change it?" Summoning every ounce of strength, Ilara pushed past the pain. She focused on the images of hope, the golden fields, the united species, the promise of coexistence. Slowly, she began channeling those emotions back into the core, letting warmth and determination flow through her fingertips and into the fractured crystal. The crack at the heart of the core shimmered, its jagged edges softening ever so slightly. In courage, Ilara poured more of herself into the effort, ignoring the toll it took on her body. Her vision blurred, her muscles burned, and her breath came in ragged gasps, but she refused to stop. Each pulse of energy she sent into the core brought a flicker of light to its darkest corners, mending the damage inch by inch. "You're doing it," the queen murmured, her tone filled with quiet admiration. "But there is still much to repair." Ilara didn't respond. She was beyond words now, lost in the rhythm of give and take between herself and the core. Time lost meaning. Exhaustion became irrelevant. All that mattered was completing the task before her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last shard of corruption faded away. The core blazed with renewed brilliance, its light filling the chamber until it seemed to swallow everything, including Ilara. She slumped forward, utterly spent, her body trembling uncontrollably. Before she could collapse completely, the queen caught her, cradling her gently in her massive arms. "You have done it," she said softly. "The balance is restored, for now." Ilara managed a weak smile, though her eyelids drooped heavily. "For now," she repeated faintly, her voice barely a whisper. Then darkness claimed her, pulling her into unconsciousness. As the queen carried her away from the core, the gathered hive erupted in celebration. Clicks, chirps, and glowing lights filled the air, a symphony of gratitude for the keeper who had risked everything to save them all. But the queen knew the battle wasn't truly over. The scars of corruption ran deep, and vigilance would be required to ensure the galaxy remained whole. For now, however, they had hope, and that was enough.